I never imagined that my nights would belong to someone else entirely, especially someone who made frostbite seem romantic. On my first night, I slipped into his room like an intruder, only to find the prince sitting upright on his bed, eyes sharper than a winter storm, as if he had been expecting me and judging me. "Don't touch the sheets," he said, voice cool but laced with a hint of amusement. "I don't like warmth from strangers." I blinked. That had to be a joke, right? Warmth from strangers? I was just a kid from a town where the biggest drama was who ate the last slice of pizza. And now I was here, in a mansion that smelled like polished wood and cold stone, facing a living, breathing ice sculpture. You'll just sit there?" I stammered, holding a blanket like a shield. He tilted his head, observing me like a cat deciding whether I was worth its attention. "No," he said finally. "You'll lie down, next to me, every night, until I say otherwise." And just like that, my life became a blur of silken sheets, soft pillows, and the endless shiver of someone who refuses to meet your eyes. I wasn't sure if it was fear or curiosity keeping me there, but I couldn't leave. Not really. Not yet. The first few nights were unbearable. His cold was literal, radiated a chill that seeped through the blankets and settled in my bones. My teeth chattered, and my hands were icy even when pressed against his body. But there was something hypnotic about him, a rigid perfection that made my heart ache in places I didn't know existed. By the third night, I found myself memorizing the curve of his jaw, the way his hair caught the lamplight, the tiny twitch at the corner of his lips whenever he said something dry or sarcastic. He was impossibly beautiful, impossibly unattainable. And yet, every night, I was there, a silent witness to his solitude. One evening, I misstepped, brushing his shoulder as I adjusted the blanket. His eyes flicked to me, sharp and dangerous. "Careful," he murmured. "Warmth is contagious, you know." I laughed nervously. I didn't mean, he interrupted with a small, cold smile that made my stomach twist. "Of course you didn't. But perhaps you enjoy it more than you let on." It was the first time he had spoken in a way that hinted at something beyond disdain. I froze. Did he just tease me? Nights turned into weeks, and my initial fear became a strange comfort. His coldness was still there, unyielding, but cracks began to appear. The smallest ones. A brush of his fingers when he shifted, a softening of his gaze when he thought I wasn't looking, a whisper of laughter when he read a passage from a book aloud. One particularly stormy night, the mansion seemed to shudder with thunder, and the wind clawed at the windows. I was lying there, pretending to sleep, when I felt him shift beside me. His hand brushed mine, not an accident, I realized immediately, but a deliberate, fleeting contact. "Why do you stay?" he asked suddenly, voice barely above the rain tapping against the glass. I hesitated. "Because you need someone," I admitted, "even if you don't say it." There was silence. Then, a whisper that seemed almost vulnerable. "And you? Do you need me?" The words hit harder than I expected. I could feel my cheeks burning, my heart hammering. I wanted to tell him the truth that yes, I did, and I had for nights I couldn't count, but instead, I stayed quiet, letting the storm outside mask the chaos in my chest. It was during one of these nights that I realized I had stopped noticing the chill. His body no longer felt like ice under my hands. It was warmth in disguise, a hidden sun behind a frozen mask. And in that warmth, I started to understand the lonely prince, not the perfect, untouchable figure everyone feared, but the boy who had been abandoned by expectation and solitude, longing for a connection he didn't know how to ask for. Then came the night he locked me in. At first, I thought it was punishment, a cruel reminder of boundaries I had crossed unintentionally. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw not anger but something else entirely: possessiveness, fear, and a desperate need to keep me close. "You belong here," he said simply, his voice softer than ever. "With me, until you choose otherwise." My chest tightened. I had never felt such a combination of fear and exhilaration. Being trapped, I realized, was no longer terrifying. It was intimate. It was proof that I mattered to him in a way that words could never express. The days that followed were quieter, tender in ways that startled me. He no longer shunned warmth, he welcomed it. Nights became less about endurance and more about closeness, the tension easing into comfort. And though the world outside remained indifferent, within the walls of that grand mansion, a fragile love had begun to bloom, one that promised to thaw the coldest of hearts. From that night onward, our lives took on a rhythm of its own. I stopped counting the hours I spent in his room, my body no longer shivering at his touch, my heart no longer racing with fear. Instead, each night became an unspoken ritual of trust and closeness. I had come to understand the nuances of his silence, the way he sighed when a blanket was tucked just right, the small smile he gave when I brushed his hair back from his forehead. These moments, fleeting as they were, became treasures I hoarded in my memory. He had a way of noticing everything without seeming to. When I laughed at a clumsy mistake, he watched me with an intensity that left me both embarrassed and thrilled. And though he never admitted it, I could sense his heart thawing in my presence. The cold prince I had feared was slowly becoming someone I recognized, someone human, someone capable of warmth, someone capable of love. One night, the mansion was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. I lay beside him, tracing patterns on the back of his hand with my finger. He didn't pull away. He let me, letting a rare, unguarded vulnerability shine through. "You've changed," he murmured, voice barely audible. "And not just me. Yourself." I tilted my head to look at him. The candlelight flickered across his face, softening the sharpness I had once feared. "I think we've changed each other," I said cautiously. A faint smile touched his lips. "Maybe," he admitted, "but you've brought warmth I never thought I'd allow myself to feel." I laughed softly, the sound mingling with the night. And in that moment, I realized how far we had come from cold silence to a fragile, tender intimacy that spoke louder than any words could. Our mornings were different too. He no longer left me at the edge of the bed like an unwelcome shadow. He shared his coffee, sometimes even making breakfast with me, though he was terrible at it. We learned each other's quirks, the small things that made us human. And as the days passed, the fear that had once defined our nights faded into a comforting companionship. But it wasn't all easy. Old habits die hard, and sometimes the walls we build around ourselves crack under pressure. There were nights when he pulled away, retreating into the icy persona that had protected him for so long. I would lie there, tracing the curve of his shoulder, whispering words that seemed to hang in the cold air. "I'm here," I'd say. "I'm not going anywhere." Eventually, he would respond, not immediately, not always verbally, but with a subtle shift, a hand brushing mine, a shoulder relaxing, a breath that told me he had heard me. Slowly, deliberately, he was learning to trust. Slowly, deliberately, I was learning to love. The turning point came one winter evening, when snow coated the grounds outside the mansion. We had spent the entire day together, walking through the gardens and talking about everything and nothing. When we returned to his room, he didn't ask me to lie down. Instead, he sat by the fireplace, gesturing for me to join him on the rug. "This is yours too," he said simply, indicating the warm glow and the blankets I had once feared. "All of this. You belong here, not just at night, but in every corner you choose to be." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I had never heard him speak with such sincerity, never seen him so unguarded. Without thinking, I sat closer, pressing my cheek against his shoulder. He stiffened for a heartbeat, then relaxed, allowing me to hold him. "I never thought I'd feel this way," he admitted quietly, "about anyone, especially not someone like you." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Someone like me? I'm just me. And you're more than a prince. You're human." For the first time, he let himself smile fully, a rare, luminous expression that reached his eyes. "Then maybe being human isn't so bad," he said. "Not when it comes with someone like you." We sat like that for hours, the fire crackling, the world outside forgotten. And as I traced the lines of his face, as he held me in a way that no longer chilled but comforted, I realized that the coldness I had feared so much had never been his real self. It had been a shield, a mask worn to protect a vulnerable heart. And now, slowly, carefully, that heart was opening first to me, and then to the world outside. Our nights became a celebration of warmth rather than endurance. He would rest his head on my shoulder, I would brush his hair, and we would whisper small secrets and promises in the dark. Laughter replaced tension, touch replaced distance, and in the quiet intimacy of our shared solitude, love bloomed unexpected, unplanned, unstoppable. And though I had once feared being locked in, I realized it had been a metaphor. For the first time in both our lives, we were willingly bound not by fear, but by trust, affection, and the shared understanding that neither of us wanted to be anywhere else. In the end, it wasn't about power or control. It was about connection, about choosing each other every day, in small gestures and quiet words, until the world outside seemed less daunting. And in that grand, lonely mansion, the prince who had once seemed untouchable had learned to love, and I had learned that sometimes warmth comes from the most unexpected places. Our story was no fairy tale with fireworks or proclamations. It was something better. It was ours. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.